Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Learning Torah Lishma. People, especially people that young boys, young girls, uh, you know, they're not, they're not experienced yet, and they're not so good at answering, especially when an adult or a much older adult says something. They say, "Oh, I think you need a therapist." They say, nasty things like that. But if you say that they're saying nasty, they're just going to say, no, I mean it for real, but they're just going to double down, right? So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? So one way to deal with it is just to tell them that, because you talk that, this type of nonsense talking is not an option of conversation between us. And because you did that, we're not going to talk for an hour or for a day, whatever you think is necessary. Sometimes you have to say 3 days, a month, depending on who you're talking to. You understand? Now, now, if it's your parents, you understand. Then you just tell them that. And you said, in the future, if you do this again, I will have, for my own security, I'm going to have to, do a consequence of me not talking to you because of the way you're treating me. So this is definitely one way, and it's simple, it's easy, everybody could do it. At the same time, there are, of course, smarter ways. When a person gains a lot of wisdom, you could take what a person says to you and turn it back on them, and it goes as follows. And so you're having a conversation, and they're like, "Yeah, I think you need a therapist," or they just say it's stam. I think if some people do need therapists, and so this is how they talk. So you tell them as follows. You say, "Listen, if someone was in a terrorist act, let's say October 7th, right? If someone comes to you that was in October 7th and says." If someone let's put it this way, if someone comes to you and says, I know someone was in a terrorist attack, they were in October 7th, I think they need a therapist. No one thinks that that's weird. No one is against that. No one, when they hear that they get upset, it bothers them. Why? Because that person was in something truly horrifying to, unfortunately, a hell type level. However, a regular person in the day could have, in their life, could have really horrible things happen, but it's not a terrorist act. So, um, so the a therapist is, someone went through something really extreme, but a healthy person should be, if it's regular life, even if it's something, bad, but I'm not talking about terrorism, but it's something really bad happened. But if it's in regular life, a person should have the wherewithal to know how to position themselves, what to do, who to talk to. You don't have to go to a therapist. You understand? They should have that wisdom. And since a person is working to become adult, an adult is that you're able to take care of things by yourself, you're able to. So a therapist, it's when someone is trying to become an adult, that's a degrading. It's a degrading. Uh, it shows that you're unevolved. You understand that you're less, and therefore it should be disgusting to a person uh, to think about themselves they need a therapist. In fact, it shouldn't even happen at all. They shouldn't think at all that they need a therapist because it's disgusting. And if someone says it to them, it should be disgusting. And if someone says it about someone else, it should be disgusting. The one exception, of course, is if someone was in a terrorism, let's say October 7th, someone was in a terrorist thing when they did just horrible things, you understand? And they were in that could be different. At the same time, that's only if the person themselves decide that they should go to someone. They don't have to go to someone. They could get out of it by understanding, but by just like in regular life, if something, how people get out of it, they just have to do that thing more extreme. We'll explain what that thing is. They just have to do that thing more extreme, and that's how they could get out of the terrorism. So it's up to a person. You understand? If you force someone, everybody understands that that's wrong. At least that's the way a healthy person's supposed to think. So again, a healthy person, when someone is trying to suggest about them or someone else, you understand? Or even if someone's talking to you and they're trying to suggest it for themselves, and it's not that they were in a terrorist situation, a person should be disgusted, and you should have to really prove to them, you understand, that is needed, as opposed to, yeah, for sure you need a therapist, and you have to prove why you don't. You understand? It should be the opposite. However, when someone was in a terrorist situation, that a healthy person is like, okay, that's different. That's, something, you understand. That is, just a horrible. That's like a horror movie, but actually happening to you. You understand? That's like a real bad thing. Like serious. That's like hellfire. You understand? It's different. It's really bad. Look what these radical Muslims do. It's just shocking what they do to each other, and when we allow them to get closer into our cities and countries, what they do to people. So, just a few days ago, there was it was like a beheading. It was just crazy what was happening. So, in that case, the terrorism, the person's not alive anymore. You understand? But other severe types of raping, they rape the girl and then beat her at the same time, and they put hot things on her and ruin her body, and just horrible things that they do. You understand? So that's terrorism. You understand? That's a different. But we're talking about regular life. Regular life can have hard things, but it's nothing compared to terrorism. You understand? So when someone comes to you and says, I was in a terrorist situation and I think I need a therapist, everybody understands that. Everybody's like, yes, of course, go. But if someone comes to you and it's regular things that happen in life, even if it was something more on the difficult side, you understand, but it wasn't terrorism. You understand? It wasn't like things like we were just discussing. You understand? Unfortunately, there's, today with videos and everything, there's so much documentation of what these animals do. You understand? So this, there's a difference, even if the boss scream at you and embarrassed you and really, it's nothing compared to terrorism. You understand? It is difficult. It is horrible. And of course, in a perfect world, it shouldn't happen to you, but there's a difference. There's clearly a difference between the two. When something moves into terrorism, it's something truly horrifying. It's not that a girl overdrank and then she was with this one man that she was going out with. She overdrank and something happened. And, he didn't, they were intimate, but he didn't they didn't have tattoos burnt onto them, and their body wasn't mutilated. It was, it's much different than when the girl was given drugs and now she's addicted, and now she goes back to these Arabs, these Muslim Arabs, and then all of a sudden the whole family watches as she is raped by all the brothers and father and everything. There's a big difference between the two. You understand? So a healthy person, when it's not terrorism, let's see if, let's see if we could help you, let's see. They don't want a therapist. It's disgusting to them. But if someone's in terrorism, then that's completely different. That people understand. That's how a healthy person thinks. So you that are telling me to go to a therapist and I did not have terrorism done to me, or you saying that when we talk about a therapist, and for whatever reason it came up, and now you're like, yeah, some people need it, this and that, and they're trying to imply something to you or to someone else, or they're just saying it regularly. Usually they're trying to imply it to you, and they're trying to put you down and push, and that's how they feel above and higher and great. You understand? You could tell them a healthy person doesn't think like that. A healthy person, when someone comes over to them outside a situation of terrorism, and they are saying that so and so should go to the therapist, or I should go, or he or she, you understand? A person should be disgusted, and you should really have to prove it to them that it's necessary. You know, understand? So that's how a healthy person thinks. And since you're not thinking that way, this is a sign that if there's anyone here that actually needs a therapist, it's you. This is a sign that you're unhealthy. You know, this is right. Of course, if it's your parents, maybe you don't say that to them, but you can say this is a sign that someone is unhealthy, and obviously it's applying to them. But you don't, say that to them, because as parents, you have to have, a next level type of honor, just like to your wife or your husband. You understand? There's three exceptions. There's a person's parents and their spouse. These are the three exceptions in life that you have to go above and beyond, and your wife is above your parents. Important for people to know that. So, so this is how. So this is how a person. So this is how a person, if they want to do it in a deeper way to tell them off. And at the same time, you could say, and if you continue to do this, then, I just won't, I will have to, like, cut off an hour. I won't speak to you when it's time, when I come home, until you learn not to do this, because this is a no-go zone. This is, you don't pass this line. This is a red line. You understand? And if you want to be part of my life, you can't cross a red line. Not everything you could say. You understand? There's free speech, but doesn't you're living in America, like, oh, there's free speech. Yes, but people don't have to listen to you. They don't have to be your friend. They don't have to allow you into their lives. So you have to learn how to be a human being and be polite and not hurt people. So that's one thing. Now, there's even a deeper level to go by it. And this is according to ancient Jewish wisdom, deep understanding of life. And that is there's something interesting that has been found. If you have two people, either two women or two boys that were in the same difficult situation, we're talking about regular life. We're not talking about, horrific, terrorism. We're not talking about those type of things. In a regular situation, bad situation, and you have one that decided that they're gonna, they're gonna persevere and they're gonna get out of it, and the other one said, I'm gonna go to a therapist. When you come 10 years later, this is this is what they found is the person that said, I'm going to persevere, and he or she figured out how to go about things, how to do things, how to be, how to raise their mind to the next level, raise how they act and how their attitude and their character and their being to the next level. This, so the person who does that and really, becomes a higher level person, a different person, that happens to the person who didn't go to therapist. The person that went to the therapist somehow just became narcissistic, because by a therapist, the whole focus is yourself. You understand? And that's the way they teach therapy today, that it's the whole focus is yourself. You talk about yourself. Everything is you. And in Judaism, it teaches that if you want to get out of a hard spot, if you want to just grow, you understand? There are two things. There's something called the energy in the battery, and then there's the mechanics in the battery, tuning things, making it whistle a little better. You understand? So working on your character trait is tuning the machine. But your energy that you get in life is when you do for others. And if you do not do for others, you just don't have energy, and you can't and you're very limited, and whatever you tune, just everything falls apart. You need to have energy, right? If the battery sits without energy, everything corrodes and gets ruined. And that's the way a human being is. They need to have energy. And the energy gives them the ability to grow and to become better, more sophisticated, next level, higher level. You understand? To learn new things, to learn new approaches, how to approach different scenarios. So in Judaism, it teaches that if a person wants to be healed, they want to become better, or if they went through a trauma and or a very difficult thing in life and they want to be healed, they have to put themselves in a position that they're giving to others, whether that's making people happy, giving money, feeding the poor, giving advice and helping people to begin their lives and not be collectors, helping people out of debt. Like I just saw someone in shul and synagogue, and he's collecting money, and he's $320,000 in debt from borrowing money for weddings and this and that. So, and I saw he was broken. So, uh, most people would tell him, "Listen, you did like very not smart things. Uh, you shouldn't act that way." But that's not what he needs to hear. That's not going to give him energy. You understand? To get out of the situation, you're actually hurting him. You're actually making it less likely that he'll get out all the way you're talking. So what I told him was, I said, $320,000. You could become rich. He was like, well, what do you mean? What can I could become rich? I'm in debt. What do you know? I said, because listen, most of us, we try to get a loan with $320,000. We can't even get it, right? Just to get like a $50,000 loan, cash, it doesn't happen. Somebody did 320. You have the mind. You have a mind of a businessman. You could make a lot of money. Yeah, you have a little debt now, but look what you could do. You could raise such money. That means you could make good money. And he smiled, and I felt like a weight was lifted off him. You understand? So, it's like Shiv and Panim Latar, different ways to approach something. Uh, when a person's in a situation, you have to really think what's the correct approach, not what you understand, because most people, what I just said, they don't have that level of knowledge, and they don't even know that they're missing it. You understand? They need to hear it once to even know that they're what to work towards. So a person at a lower level. So I was once at a lower level, absolutely. But I knew that there is something high, I just don't know it yet. And because I kept quiet and I didn't talk negatively, and I wait and I try to gain more wisdom and more understanding, more caring, and most importantly, I kept my mouth shut, not to hurt people, even though I had what to say, but it wouldn't be helpful. To say anything. It would have been it's something smart to tell someone, listen, you can't, look what happened. That's what happens when you take out debt, and you don't have a parnasa, nothing. You're kaila, this, that, and this is what happens. I didn't say that to him. I kept my mouth shut, and because you kept your mouth shut long enough, your mind started to crank and figure out a different way to approach it, and you start to get ideas, and your mind starts to expand. You understand? And you also you search. You try to listen to different drashos of different tzaddikim, holy people, and until you find other approaches, and then you see which one is appropriate and which one is actually helpful. Once this guy starts to get up, starts to work and starts to, use his wisdom to actually become self-sufficient. Now you could approach him, and when he's already energized, you understand? Now you could come and tell him, listen, you can't put yourself more into debt. This is not healthy for you. But berating someone, we're not in the army. You're not in a closed environment that you could break someone and they can't get out, and you force them to grow. That's not the scenario. This is not the army. You understand? So you can't work that way. So so getting back. So according to the ancient Jewish wisdom, the hashkafa, the deep ideology, according to Judaism, of how life works, is is like we just explained, but we'll just say it again because we went on to this story, is midas, working on your character. That whole aspect of life is fine tuning, is fixing the machine, is fine tuning it. But what actually gives it energy is when you do for others. Now, in most cases in life, when you do for others, you also get paid, right? You give a service, and the person then gives you certificates of appreciation, whether that's dollars, rubles, whatever it may be, gold, silver, whatever it may be. Shekels, the person gives you certificates of appreciation. And that's the way things are, absolutely. So when a person, for instance, God forbid, if someone, chas v'shalom, someone goes through a terrorist situation, they have to give at such a level in order to get out of it. And and if a person says they want to go to a therapist, of course that's different than regular life, because that is, a person was damaged to such an extent, the machine was damaged so severely, you understand, that you need to have a deep focus on the machine. But a regular person, whatever happens to them in life, the machine wasn't damaged to such a level that you're afraid the machine's going to fall apart. The person's going to go crazy, the person's going to lose their mind. That's not usually the scenario. That's a rare scenario. So you sort of have to prove that that is the scenario. You understand? At the end of the day, a person could choose whatever they want to do in life. But if they're asking you, then this is when you care about them, this is how you go about it. So so the this this is the deep wisdom. So Hashem, God, made that kindness is like the dew that revives people from death. The so there's a special type of dew that God has that brings people back to life. Tchias hamesim. You understand? So Hashem made it that there's a certain aspect, a certain percent of that dew is mixed into kindness. So even you would think, if a person's machine is, let's say, is almost completely broken, and you would think that he first has to focus completely on himself in order that the machine that he shouldn't go crazy, the machine shouldn't fall apart, that he shouldn't completely lose himself, him or herself, God forbid, chas v'shalom. Hashem, you should know that you could go to a therapist. That is a method, and in this, and but at the same time, God also has the special dew. That's the dew of Tchias hamesim, the dew that revives the dead. He has that. That's put into kindness, and when a person does kindness, and someone in this situation has to do it so much, has to do it to a crazy extent, that's another way to get out of it. And a person, of course, could choose as whichever way they want to use. Some people might want to do both. You understand? Of course, one will take away from the other, but that's also another method. You understand? But to force someone to say, because you went through terrorism, now you have to go to a therapist, that actually hurts them most. You could tell them this is different ways. Kindness has a certain a special life-giving dew from heaven. So you could either just go crazy into kindness, or you could go to therapist, or you could do both. A person could choose. You understand what they want to do, and when you give them that choice, instead of telling them you need to do this, this, that, uh, you know, you show them the different options, and then they can choose for themselves which one suits best for themselves. That's actually a good friend. That's actually a good person. So this is another deep way to explain it, and going back to the core of this deeper way is that mashal, that parable of two people that went through the same thing, whether the male or female, and the person who decided that they're going to take responsibility for their life and they're going to figure things out, and the other person that put it on someone else, on the therapist, the person who took custody of themselves, that person 10 years later will be way ahead of the other person. The other person might not only might they not have grown, but they might have actually gone reverse, completely gave up self custody, self responsibility, you understand, for themselves. And I've spoken to people that they're completely, they went to a therapist, and I'm like, they're handsome, they have a nice car, they have a beautiful wife and kids and everything, but they still think if they don't see the therapist, they're gonna go crazy. And I'm like, why are you gonna go crazy? There's nothing meant. They're, they're completely. There's nothing wrong with them. You understand? They're. It's just that they went to therapists at a young age, and if the therapist only takes terrorist situation, there's not. That's rare, and they can't make a living like that. So they push their method into regular people's lives. You understand? And it's not really helpful in regular people's lives, because their method is meant for when you have a machine that's completely broken. It's not meant for a healthy machine. Their method of focusing on yourself, and they're not thinking about chesed, kindness, and how you're treating other people. It's just like a severe focus of how you're feeling and this and that. That just creates a narcissist. Someone who went through terrorism, and that's different. You understand? There is a method of completely focusing on yourself, being a little narcissistic, and that will fix your engine. Yes, there is. So the method, but but how many people have that happen to them? If we only had a handful of therapists, let's say, but everybody's a therapist. There's so many, you need to have jobs for them. So they trick people into thinking that any issue, a fight between husband and wife, anything, you need to go to a therapist. Now there's a difference between going to a therapist and then, let's say a Jew that's, that the ideology of Judaism is affecting them, even if they don't understand exactly what it is, but the fact that they live in the community, it affects them, and then they go to Goyim and learn this therapy, so they're better than a regular guy, because mixed into that is kindness, you understand? Is taking responsibility, is how are you treating your husband? You understand? How are you treating your wife? How are you treating other people? Even though that's a bit more mixed into it, but they're still damaged, because they are using the Goyish method, and Judaism has its own method, which is the method that our sages figured out from the way God created the world. You understand? So it's a whole different level. So when a person needs a little guidance, a little help, they should be going to a tzaddik emes, a true rabbi, a true rebbitzin, a true rebbe, a true chacham, a true mashpia, just a true yid that has, they don't have to be a rav in order for you to go to them. A true talmid chacham, you understand? A true rebbitzin, So to, help them on their journey to growth. But a therapist, that's really not part of the equation. Now, there's a big issue today that most of the rabbis, rebbes and rebbes, chachams, mashpiyim, all this, most of them, haven't gone through the trials and tribulations of life, and they have a very, they have a, they're in Israel they call it lo muvushal. They're not cooked. They're not cooked. So they really don't have the wisdom. They don't have the wisdom. They could parrot things that they saw, that they read in the Torah, but to be able to think like Avram Avinu before the Torah was given, to have their own thought and to figure out truth, they don't really have that. It's very, very limited. So a person's like, well, my rabbi doesn't have it, or my Rebbetzin doesn't have it, right? Or Rebbe or Chacham Mashpia, or the Talmud Chacham that lives on the block doesn't have it, and then you have this therapist that it has a special signed thing from some pervert that gave it to her or him. You understand? And so they look more. So there. It looks like that's where I could get that's the person who could truly help me, and these other people that can't, and they don't realize that both can't help you. Both can't help you. If from the two that could help you, it's the righteous person. You understand? Uh, if because they're at least saying the words from God, and there's like direct advice from God, but they're not muvashal. They don't understand how God's words connect to the world and how everything flows through God's words. And there's different words that God say, and but someone who is at least connected to God's word, even if they don't understand exactly how everything works, you'll have better advice from them. Now, at the same time, don't stop there. You need to find someone, a Talmud Chacham, that has true wisdom. In the Hasidic world, they called it Tzaddik Emes, the true righteous person. And today it's not so easy to find, you understand? But, life's a journey, and that's one of the things that you need to pick up, in life, and you need to eventually become the why, the tzaddik emes for other people, you understand? So this is part of life, you understand? It used to be that to become a Talmud Chacham, it would be impossible if you to become a Talmud Chacham. If you're not going to be a tzaddik emes, you would never be able to become a Talmud Chacham. The only way to become a Talmud Chacham was to become a tzaddik emes. But today, it's very easy for people to learn. Everything comes easy, especially today with the kollel style. Right? All the boys are taught, and the girls are taught. The boys are taught that money will come from heaven. Just learn. Everybody else has to pay for you, and the girls are taught, you should marry that type of boy, and you should be the one making the money. And so and today we have you can get any safer. Everything is unlimited. So today it's the opposite. We have there's American goods, and then there's Chinese. So today we have we have Chinese goods, and and then it's like a needle in the haystack. You find an American quality engine, amongst all the Chinese goods. So that's what we have today. We just have abundance, but we're missing quality. Quality is when a person experiences life the way people experience life for all time, that you worked, there was hard times, people are coming after you, you understand, your loving family helps you to get married. There's none of this resume that a child would even think to say to their parents or to say to their brother, you understand, or sister, resume. They think of something, and she, she looks, and she looks, it's a normal age, and she looks good in your eyes. So then you go out. You don't need a resume. You understand? So, so this is what we call a healthy trials and tribulations is part of a healthy life. But when a person never had to work and never had to, never was fired, and never understands what it means to be a good employee, and or to become a boss, and the responsibility, all these things that they don't experience, then what happens is it becomes Chinese goods. It's not the real McCoy. You understand? It's not the real thing. You understand? And that's what we have to do. We have so many. So a person has to be. If someone's a Talmud Chacham and they work, or they worked, and while they're working they learned and they became rich, and then eventually they retired and now they learn all day, or they learn a half a day, they work a half a day, you know, or someone, who works the whole day, but he learns as well. This, someone that went through the trials and tribulations of life, the way people went through it for all time, you understand? They they weren't put in an exceptional situation. That person usually is someone that will have true wisdom. So when you understand the machine that's making the fake ones and the machine that makes the real good American goods, you understand, then you could just try to find a machine, someone that went through that way, that all of our sages of old, right? They were carpenters. They would collect wood. Hillel Azakin, right? One of the greatest, if it wasn't for Hillel, right? How much we learned from Hillel Azakin. He would collect wood, firewood, and bring it to people's houses, and they would pay him, and that's how he would live. That's how he made his parnasa, his livelihood. So, so just to just when you see someone that's went through what we call the normal the normal life, the way of all our sages, of all of a the way a regular person is supposed to experience life, that's usually a sign that they're going to have true wisdom. But if someone just was kailel and never worked, and wasn't a rebbe, even being a rebbe, you have responsibilities, you have a boss, right? You know, you learn a lot, or a mora, there's a lot. There's a lot, there's a lot to learn, that's a job. You understand? It, you know, so that qualifies as well. But someone who, it's just kind of they didn't experience life, and they just went from learning to kailel to becoming the rav and this and that, but they didn't experience life, that you work and this and that, you have a day-to-day job, they didn't experience life. This is usually a sign that this person is not muvushal, they're not cooked. It's a Chinese engine. It's not the real McCoy. It's not American made. You understand? That's usually what. But someone who you find that is, that, this Talmud Chacham Rabbi Yaron Ruvain, he actually, was brought up not from, and then he became from, but he was in the world of business. I don't even know if he understands it, but if he wasn't in the world of business, he wouldn't have the wisdom that he has today. Even though he's pushing for, he actually understands it towards. By me, it's more like, Kyle, it's a no. You understand? By him, it's still an option, but he doesn't realize that if he didn't work and have that job that he had and the business that he had, he would be maybe 10%. Even if he learned all that time, you understand, he would be 10% of what he is today, because he worked and he learned. The working place is where a man is made. It's where an adult is formed. You understand? And You learn Torah, it teaches you character, it teaches you good ethics, but to bake it into you, to become formed and to learn the social wisdom, you need to be in a working environment. You need to be dealing with people and have a boss or have a business responsibility. You need to have this to grow into an adult, into a proper human being. And the people that go from yeshiva to kollel and they do not have that, they just, they're a shadow of their true abilities. And they could easily change that by, you know, going into the workforce. Not saying not learning, of course you learn as well, but going into the workforce, whether it is, a full day's work and then you're kaveh itim in the, in the morning or at night, or 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 you work half a day and you learn half a day, whatever it is, you need to experience normal life. Someone who doesn't have the experience of normal life is going to miss part of their normalcy, and the normalcy is what gives a person the great, deep understanding of the wisdoms that they learn or that they understand, that they pick up. You understand? So, and there's many things that you'll, as much as you'll read it, if you don't experience it, you won't pick it up. So uh, so this is how a person could find, you know a, this is signs of how you don't waste too much time. Is, did this person, did they retire from a business? Did they retire from working? Do they work? You understand? And they learn, and they have tremendous Torah knowledge. They're learning some people learn different ways, you understand? But, Torah is a part of their life. God is a part of their life, and they work, and they have tons of interactions with people. That's, you understand? And they learn responsibility and all these things. Then there's a good chance that this person is what we would call a tzaddik emet, someone that has a true righteous person, that actually has true wisdom. You understand? And sometimes you find someone, and then later on you find someone that's even greater. Doesn't mean you throw the other one to the curve, but there's a nice way to go up the ladder. You understand? And the person who's at the next level, is a very high level. You don't have to ask them all the questions. If you have people that are not at his level, they're lower, but they also have true wisdom, you could ask them, the easier questions, and when it comes to harder questions, you ask the person more on top. There's a whole wisdom of going about it. You understand? So this is what people need to realize. So now going back to what we're saying in this third method is, you just tell your parents that you have two people went through a similar thing. One goes to therapist, one doesn't. Each one's taking. If you don't take responsibility, then it's very hard to grow. But if they both took responsibility. One took responsibility by going to a therapist. One took responsibility by saying, "What do I need to do?" You understand? The second one that didn't go to a therapist, you understand, that took self-responsibility, what we call an adult, that person, when you look 5-10 years later, will be way ahead of the other person. The other person might be stuck in that beginning stage, might even gone backwards. You understand? And this is something that everybody understands. If they don't, they're just pretending. If they really don't understand, you know, you have to understand the, at the end of the day, you can't be so affected by stupid people. You understand? You just, okay, they're not the brightest tool in the shed. You understand? You have to just realize that and create boundaries, and just not allow, not have conversations. And if they go over bounds, you could, hour, I'm not going to speak to you, a day, whatever it is. You can say at the same time, say, I want a relationship with you, but you went over the red line. So because of that, for an hour we cannot speak. When I come home, I won't respond to you. At least when there isn't going to be a conversation. This is a method. You know, this is a method of how to go about it when your friends or family, or God forbid your parents or your wife treats you, or your husband treats you that way. You understand? But it's important not to go overboard, not to just make everything, I'm not going to speak to this, that. This is used for when they have serious errors in the way they think. You understand? And they're trying to put those errors onto you, and they're trying to affect you. You understand? So, and they don't get to decide what's a serious error, what isn't. That's for you to decide, right? For some people it's this thing, for some people it's that. So, you know, different people, it could be different things. We just gave an example now, but for different people it could be different things. And so this is how to deal with it. I love you, and Hashem loves you more.